Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our fourth season, we're looking at Kenneth Branagh's 2011 movie, Thor. I'm Matthew Fox from the Superhero Ethics and the Star Wars Universe podcasts.
And I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
And today we're talking about minute 73, which begins with Erik's drunken ramblings and ends with Jane and Thor sitting out by the fire. Joining us on the show today, as is every day this week, we have Bubbawheat from the Flights, Tights, Movie Nights podcast. Bubba, I've been hearing a lot about the other movies and stuff you do. Obviously, you have a big Superman love with Flights and Tights. What's kind of your connection to the MCU and to Thor?
Through my written reviews, I have reviewed every single Marvel movie ever made, at least up through Shang-Chi. I have a newborn, which has interrupted my theater going a little bit, so I haven't been able to make it to see Venom or Eternals. But and there's a lot more Marvel movies than people realize. By my count, I believe either Spider-Man No Way Home or Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness will be the 100th feature-length Marvel-related movie.
Wow.
So you've included Man-Thing in your list and
yeah,
all those fun ones.
Man, I think my favorite one that I like to bring up is in 1980 and 81, they actually commissioned a couple, or they licensed a couple anime films that were straight-to-TV movies based on the Tomb of Dracula, and one was a Dracula film, and then the other one was a Frankenstein film.
Wow.
And they are a trip. I mean, they're awful, but they are a trip.
It's so funny because I imagine, like, I'm the sort of person who would just Google, like, show me every Dracula film I can find. Okay, cool, I'll watch this. And then be like, what in the world is a Marvel logo doing on this? So, like,
I don't think they even put a Marvel logo. I think just at the end, they probably have based on the Tomb of Dracula by Marvel.
Right. Well, I mean, it's public domain, so have fun with it. Well, you get to hear so many more of your thoughts right after this quick break.
Doing this podcast is a lot of fun, but it takes time and costs money. What better way to support us this holiday season than by becoming a patron of our show? If you're familiar with Patreon, we use their other platform called Memberful, which basically allows us to integrate their site directly into our site. So if you've been thinking about becoming a patron to show your love for the show, you weren't sure because you couldn't find us on Patreon, just know we are in fact using their platform. Just go to truestory.fm/Marvel Movie Minute and you can find out what we offer to our patrons. It's only $5 a month, or you can get a discount if you join at the annual rate. Thanks.
Erik doesn't think that Thor is actually the god of thunder, but he ought to be, which is just a wonderfully ironic statement that we all kind of know. But I just kind of love it. We were talking yesterday about the Stellan is a fun drunk, and to me, this is just the epitome of it because he just to me, it's Thor's charisma. Like he may still think when he sobers up that Thor and Jane are terrible for each other, but all the animosity is gone. He's just like, I want you to have your dreams, and if that's to be the god of thunder, have fun.
And it's very friendly bromance, but at the same time, I feel like there's a little bit of a fatherly aspect to it too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it comes across that way. And I really love the way that the two of them play this. Like, I feel like Stellan is, he's such a fun drunk as Erik in this moment. And the way that he's kind of like still disregarding, like, I just can't get over this idea that you might be Thor, but you represent everything that I've always thought of as a part of Thor. And so, yeah, you ought to be Thor. But then the way that Chris Hemsworth plays Thor here, it's like he's so friendly and just like charming. And like even in this moment of the two of them, it just looks like over the course of however long they were at the bar drinking, they really developed some connection. And that's what I love about this, because I mean, we last saw Erik and he was ready to kick Thor out of town. Something happened, and it really doesn't matter that we never get to see it, whether it was a fight, whether it was just hanging out and drinking and finding that connection, whatever it was, there was a connection. And now, from here moving forward through the Marvel Cinematic Universe, every time that we have Stellan Skarsgård as Erik in the film, he has this connection to Thor. There has been this moment that they had that allows them to be friends. And that's what I think is powerful about whatever happened off screen. It's something magical that brought them together.
And I love what you say about how clearly we get that, because I think you're right. And it's not stated. It's very understated. Even Jane's reaction, she sort of smiles, but then doesn't want to be caught smiling and looks a little, in the script, it is so much more on the nose. The line from the script is, as Selvig drifts off to sleep, Thor pulls a blanket over him. Jane watches, stunned by their friendship, impressed by Thor's tenderness. And it's a very good script in a lot of ways, but I feel like Branagh just turned it down from 100% to 80% in so many places. And this is one more where I feel like if it had gone that far, it would have been over the top, and it would have felt like, instead of just, it's understated, but we get it.
It's interesting because what ends up happening when you have a script that's at 100 and then Branagh brings it down to 80 in the finished film, it's back at 100, but in a way that is, I find, so much more believable. And that's what's really interesting about the smarts of a director and an editor and just all of these people working on a film, of finding those things that are in the script that when it's there, it really is just too much. Because if it was in the film would have been at 110, and you don't need that. And that's what I think is just, there's smart filmmaking happening here.
I mean, I know nothing about the Hollywood writing process, but I imagine that the tension between writer, filmmaker, cinematographer, director, of, the writer thinking they've got to, like, well, I need my words to say everything, and the cinematographer being like, hold on, I can tell some of the story for you too, like that. There's a lot of that going on here.
Yeah, certainly.
What do you think is happening with Jane? Like, what's going through her head as she's watching this? Because she had a half smiles, and then she has a concerned look. Like, what's going on with her?
I think she's just trying to figure it out, and I feel like she's also it's the beginning of this being flustered by having Thor there, which we get to see a little bit, like, just a little bit later in this minute.
So I want to ask a question now that maybe you two, as the much better about the details of these things. We are taking Erik to Jane's trailer. This is where she lives. Erik, like, he's sleeping somewhere, right? Does he, is it just that he's too drunk to tell Thor, like, well, my hotel room is over there, or I sleep over here? Is it that Thor just wants to go to Jane? Like, how did we wind up here instead of wherever Erik normally spends the night?
I mean, that is a big question, certainly here. My sense of it, I think all of that is probably right. There probably was a drunk Erik who was just too past a point where he could, actually get across where he needed to go as far as what hotel he's in, and like, turn left here, turn right there. It's the 3rd floor. My keys in my pocket, like all that sort of stuff. Like, he probably just couldn't get through any of that to kind of explain to Thor. But also, I do think there is this element where Thor, he hasn't seen Jane since he left her at the crater base. So I think part of him just wants to make sure she's fine. Erik has said as much, but he hasn't seen her. So I think he wants to check on her. He knows that she's a safe space, so he can put Erik there. And I do think that there's this draw to her that he can't stop. He really wants to see her. And regardless of what Erik said about leaving town, I feel like we're at this point where, because of the shaping of the relationship between Erik and Thor, I feel like there's a place where where Thor feels, maybe I can still connect with her and I don't have to leave town. And so I think that there's all those things. And
I think I see that. And I think that at this point, Thor is still unsure, and I've certainly seen situations where people get very drunk and have a great time with people they hate and still hate them in the morning. And because when Thor is like, he's happy to have this time with Jane, but yeah, I get the sense that he's sort of like, at this point, Jane might kind of invite, I should be leaving. If Jane invites me to stay, I'm going to stay. And I hope she does, but I don't really know where I fit now. And so there's just kind of awkwardness between the two of them. And he has that great line about, "Are these your chambers?" which is just one more wonderful, like, fish out of water moment. But I definitely get, like, I think you put in the notes that they look like they've flirted and gone too far, and now they're both nervous about it. I think they're both just, like, not sure where they're supposed to be going right now.
Yeah, and I think that you see that because Thor, he puts Erik down. Both of them are like, fumbling, like, what do we do next? And Thor looks like he's actually going to start leaving. Like, he goes to the door, but then you've got this moment where we're looking up at him through the door, and we see him kind of pause. The brief moment of indecision on it kind of plays across his face, and he decides to turn back, and it's like he doesn't even know what to do, and he just, it's like, just one of those lines that you throw out that is completely, you're just like, nice weather today, huh? Like, right. When he's like, "Are these your chambers?" It's just like, I gotta say something because otherwise I have to walk out the door, and I don't want to do that. And it's that great rom-com thing where he's just throwing something out,
And it's nice weather today while there's a pouring down storm. I mean, like, right. He's trying to be polite in this just wreck of a trailer that she's living in.
And I love how he's framed in that doorway. And I talked a little bit about this in the last minute, just how he doesn't fit in this box. Like, as he's framed, you see that his head actually goes, like, the door frame cuts him off, like, around his jawline, give or take. And so he's inside this too small RV, even though, like, the ceiling, like, he's not ducking down. It's not that extreme. But because he's framed in this doorway that's smaller than the rest of the RV, he is boxed in to this. He's like, I almost feel like it's kind of showing how he's, like, in a way, how he's trapped in Midgard. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't fit. And just like his flannel makes him be this out of place, he's just as out of place inside this tiny RV.
We keep comparing the script and how it was put together. I mean, the script went even farther because it says Thor moves through the small trailer carrying Selvig like a bear lugging another bear, smashing into things along the way until he finally sets Selvig down on Jane's bed. I know that would have taken place a little earlier, but still, it's that sense of, like, that Raising Arizona. This prefab house is too small for a fight, or the trailer fight in Kill Bill. These spaces where all these things, it creates this comical effect. And I think you're exactly right that we don't necessarily need to have him bumping into everything just by framing him in the door that way, where as you're looking through, the whole top of his head is chopped off and you just see his jaw down. Like, that says all of that. We don't need to have that kind of, like, those comedic beats in there. It's not the right tone for this moment that we're creating here.
Yeah, I think it's, as we'll see later in this minute, it is in such stark contrast to when they're up on the roof, and it's just them, the roof, the building in the background, and then the whole Starry Night. It's the exact opposite. I then want to shift into what we start to get in. She says it's more of a temporary living situation, and then she goes into flustered mode. And Andy, you put that she notices the breakfast mess. I think you're being very charitable. I think she's eating Go Lean Crunch 3 meals a day when people aren't taking her to that diner. But I noticed this because, and I'm mostly going to talk about this in the next minute, but this scene especially is where, like, the rom-com trope is just 100% what we're getting. By the time this releases, it'll be in January, except for our members. But we're recording this in December. We're recording this in mid-November, when a lot of people I know are already deep into their watch every Hallmark cheesy Christmas rom-com they can. And, like, this moment here of our heroine is flustered in the presence of Mr. Beautiful, but he's just being, like, kind and trying to reassure her while she's just bouncing around hilariously. Like, I've seen this scene 100 times, and I feel like it is very intentional of Kenneth Branagh being like, we're doing action, we're doing mystical, we're doing sci-fi, but by the way, this is rom-com right now. And we can carry that all the way through the next minute.
Yeah, personally, I love it. I think Natalie Portman handles it well, and I just, love her flusteredness, and I'm not a huge fan of romantic comedies, but a little bit of romantic comedy goes a long way, and I feel like at least for me, this is just the right amount, and she is so adorable, and a lot of people. I feel like I've heard a lot of people deride the chemistry across the two Thor movies between Portman and Hemsworth as not being the best. And I get that a little bit. I feel like, especially in this movie, it's a bit more one-sided. I think the chemistry from Natalie Portman's side is excellent. I think she plays the woman that is developing a crush on this guy perfectly. Just the looks that she has, her flusteredness, everything that she does really conveys that she's really taken by this guy, and her appreciation and attraction to him is growing as the film goes on. And I think that the issue is because Hemsworth is so busy being Thor, because Thor is so much of a character that him being Thor doesn't leave room for him to be Thor developing this romantic feeling.
I mean, yeah, I can see that. Although for me, I guess I end up, maybe it's just because I've been watching this minute by minute, but I'm finding a lot more of him, like I'm buying into it more on this viewing, like just the way that he kind of approaches their conversations and the things that he says that clearly shows he really pays attention, even when it looks like he's not paying attention. Like he's really actively always listening, always present, and always drawn to her. Like there's something about her that he is really kind of drawn to from the moment they're both lying, staring at each other out in the Bifrost. The dust cloud from the Bifrost. I feel like there is something there, and she certainly carries it more. But I feel like as I've been watching the film, I am finding more kind of coming from him, and I do think that it plays. And I find, especially as the franchise grows and we see him pining for her in later films, like I find myself really buying into this meet cute, this romance that happens in 24 hours. I mean, which happens often in rom-coms. You get this thing, and I find myself really buying into it, and so I feel that they actually do pull it off in an interesting way. Especially, and I was thinking about it, is this the first woman that Thor actually has fallen for, as opposed to slept with? Because I think as a royal, I don't know, my hunch is he probably hasn't really been allowed to date, at least my sense. Yeah. I
mean, we don't know the details of it, but certainly Sif gives us the feeling of that Sif does have the kind of relationship you're talking about, where she's pining for him and he's kind of like, oh, you're my favorite gal in a fight. But I want to kind of go to two things that we just talked about there, about Jane and about Thor, because first of all, I am ready to declare my conversion moment. The scales have fallen from my eyes. I started this movie having for many years said that I thought that one of the problems with this movie is that, like the Star Wars prequels before it, it took an amazing actress like Natalie Portman and just utterly misused her. I'm ready to say I'm wrong there, because I think that I probably, like a lot of other Star Wars fans, just so badly wanted to not just admit that it was just that movie being bad, that no, Natalie Portman is bad in, no, she's great in this. I'm wrong. She's like, it's just Star Wars that they couldn't get her right in. But the other thing is, in terms of what you're saying, Bubba, about him, especially in this minute, coming across as a little more withdrawn, I am a little more fond of the rom-com trope. I have till this point resisted the siren song of Hallmark. I try to resist till at least Thanksgiving, at which point I will indulge to my heart's content. And to me, this is one more part of the trope, because one of the things that will often happen is shy, awkward girl is utterly, besotted with this beautiful man who just seems to be nice to everyone. And because he's just nice to everyone, she often doubts, like, is he feeling it back? And so I think in this minute especially, that's definitely the energy they're getting. But I think that's very intentional because in the next minute, again, very much in the trope, he's going to show how much he's been paying attention to her. So like, I definitely hear you, but I do think that like that I think he's giving a lot back. You may be right that Hemsworth, the actor, isn't. But I do think that there's some of this is just like it's the way the trope is playing out.
Well, but do you think that, like, because the way that you say that, I feel like Thor is actually the one who's kind of like the shy, awkward one here. Like, he doesn't know what to say. Like, he's like, I've got to leave. I've got to say something. I don't know what to do here. I have the feels inside, and I've never had these feelings for a woman before. Like, there's something that feels like he's having a romance as opposed to kind of just a kind of a purely sexual relationship or whatever he's had in the past. I feel like there is something here, but he's never done that. And so I think that there is, like, he doesn't know how to do it. And that's, I don't know, that's the way that I see it.
I feel like we don't really see that from him until the next, to me, I still get everything about Erik. I mean, it's only like, what is it, 3 hours from whence he tried to pick up the hammer and failed? Like, he's had a very busy couple of hours. And I guess to me, I think of it as more as he's just like not sure about any of this. And he's not quite, we know, having seen the whole movie, how he feels. I don't think we're quite seeing that from him yet, but you may also be right. That may be exactly what's going on.
Maybe I'm just reading too much in that little tiny look that he gives as he's getting ready to leave. And he's just like, I want to stay. I don't want to leave. Like, there's just this tiny look on his face before he turns and says, "Are these your chambers?" And maybe I'm just reading too much into that, but that was just my sense of it.
I think that moment's definitely there. I think we're supposed to see that. I think the point is that Jane doesn't see that.
Yeah.
And so that's why it seems like they don't have chemistry, because they're both firing in different directions as they're both wanting to connect with each other.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the situation that they get into up on the roof. First of all, fire on the roof. We've had some questions about workplace standards. Not really know if that's in their lease contract with the auto place here. Part
of me wonders, like, maybe the Smith Motors people are okay if this building burns down and they just take the insurance money. Like, it's obviously, you know, they're just renting it to whoever comes along at this point. And she at this point just kind of goes into a little monologue as he's just like staring at her indulgently. And like, I think now is when we're really getting, he's just besotted with her as well. Andy, I think you had some thoughts on kind of what she has to say here. Well, yeah, I mean, again, playing into Natalie Portman doing comedy well. She's like, I love coming up here, or I'll come up here when I'm trying to reconcile particle data, which, I mean, that's just such a great science nerd line to throw out. It's just like, what are you? That sounds like a great time. Or when Darcy's driving me crazy. I come up here a lot, actually. Like, the way that she throws that last line out there just cracks me up, because it's just like, oh, yeah, I'm all up here all the time. Darcy's always driving me crazy. I'm always busy. Like, there's always these things going on, and I do everything up here. The way that she just spins that, I find very funny. And I think it speaks to Natalie's, the fact that she knows how to do comedy. I think she's good at it. Did either of you get any read from that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. It's the escalation of... it's a very quick comedic escalation. I come up here when I do science things or when Darcy's driving me crazy. Yeah, I actually do come up here a lot. Yeah. I think there's that. I also think it's she's nervous and she's babbling, but like some people babble about the weather, she babbles about particle data. Because she is, that's in some ways, I think that's one of the brilliances of her character, is that she is this utterly brilliant scientist who will happily drive into incredible danger to chase science, who also gets to be flustered in the presence of a gorgeous person who she has a crush on. Like, and I just love that. And I love that we get to see that duality. I think the speech is a great way of showing that.
Yeah.
And I think the setup just in general also shows a great duality, because it is, them being outside in front of a fire, which fits into like the Norse, you could see Thor in the Warriors 3 going out on some quest and sitting, talking by the fire out in the wilderness. But at the same time, it's also, they're on the top of a roof with lawn furniture. So it shows kind of the low rent aspect of how Jane is just throwing everything together in order to make it work.
I think that's a key element that, she is scrappy, right? She's always trying to whatever it takes, and she'll do whatever. And I love that about her. I also really love the fact that they use the roof in these ways. It's an interesting location in the first place to just put the characters on the roof, especially with that gorgeous, the neon. I love that Smith Motors neon that we have right behind them. But also just metaphorically in the film, putting them on the roof, bringing them closer to the gods. I think there's something very clever about that concept, and I love that they're up here. I find it just kind of a nice change. I mean, when you're looking for locations, that's the thing that kind of sparks your interest. It's like, oh, that would be a really interesting little thing to try that. So I love this spot here.
Yeah. I also want to say, early on, Andy, when you and I were discussing this movie and various feelings and opinions about it and being excited about it, I mentioned that, in many circles, especially in kind of feminist analysis, although the more humorous side, Thor is often referred to as a himbo, which I think was a term you were not yet familiar with.
No, yeah, right.
And it's a term that it on some level it can just mean a pretty boy who's dumb, but it's also come to mean a fundamentally good guy. The guy who he's going to listen to you talk about your problems and not interrupt. He's going to support you without trying to solve. He's not going to make himself the center of it. And Thor and Kronk from Emperor's New Groove are often considered the progenitors of the type. And I think this scene especially, because she's babbling and he just lets her talk, and he's active listening. He's leaning forward. He's clearly engaged. He's not trying to make the conversation about him. To me, this is just it's a small thing. I'll see even more in the next minute, but it's such a defining moment of, think about Donald Blake, the guy who'd never had time for the relationship. In this moment, it feels like for Thor, he's just lost his hammer. He's lost his world, his kingdom, but the only thing in the world that matters to him is what Jane is saying. And that to me is just quintessential, what I understand himbo to mean.
Well, that's actually a good point because, I mean, Thor was devastated a few hours ago. He had lost his home. He had lost his hammer. He had lost his mother, her love. His father is dead. His brother won't let him come home. That, he's had so many doors shut on him, and he was a broken man. And there is an element of rebuilding that we have right here. And perhaps that is one of the elements that is the reason he brings Erik to Jane's trailer, because Jane is a connection that he could potentially have that could help him on his journey to rebuild. And so there is this element of being drawn to that one who can save you in a time like this when he is hurt. And so we're not seeing any of the hurt in this particular couple of minutes. I think he's kind of, maybe he just quickly shuts the door on those sorts of emotions and moves forward. But I like to think that, there is this draw to this person who can help him, kind of move forward through his healing.
So I think that's about where we can wrap up. There's some great technical stuff here to talk about, though. The way the fire is lighting them both is just this incredibly romantic spot. The Smith Motors sign has this great neon glow behind them. What else do you all notice in terms of the way this fire scene is shot?
Well, just not necessarily how it's shot, but I mean, Patrick Doyle's music. I mean, the science and magic track kicks in here, and it's just, it's the Thor's theme is underneath it. It's just so stinking romantic. It's just beautiful. And also we've kind of, for the moment, we've, at least at the start of this, we've left the Dutch angles to the side. So
yeah, which. That may just be because some editor was like, Branagh, come on, enough. I think, though, it could also be that Thor's finally finding his footing.
Yeah.
He is now starting to become grounded. He is starting to find real connections in a way he never had. So,
yeah, that was something that I didn't notice the first couple times that I watched Thor, and then as soon as I read about it, I noticed it especially at the beginning of this film, whenever I rewatched it last week. And then, for me, every time I watch this, I notice it at the beginning. I notice it here and there in certain parts where it's just incredibly blatant. And then I forget about it because I just get sucked into the movie every time I watch it.
Yeah, let's do that. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up. Thank you both as always. Bubbawheat, you were talking to us yesterday about all the reviews you've written and things like that. For you, what is your favorite Marvel movie that you've gotten to review that none of us have heard of? Like, and here I mean like a Marvel movie that's not the MCU, not Spider-Man, not Blade, not Fantastic Four. Like, that's maybe only 30, 40 movies. Clearly there's a ton more. Actually, probably there's a lot more Spider-Man movies out there. But what's been your favorite of the ones that are not like well known?
I'm really bad at coming up with that sort of stuff on my memory. So I've actually got to, pull up a list here. Which I do have a letterboxed list where I have collected all of these Marvel films. I do enjoy. Marvel had a deal I think at the early stages of whenever Iron Man came out. And I think even just a little bit before that, where they did a series of, I always forget if it's 7 or 9 animated films. And most of them are not quite as good as like the DC animated films. Mm-hmm. But I think some of them are pretty good. And I think one that stands out a little bit is actually the one of the Thor movies they did was Tales of Asgard, which it basically followed a teenage Thor, and it was him and Loki going after the sword of Surtur.
Yeah.
And I think that is a really fun little movie. The only thing that I didn't like about it is Thor's character arc is almost identical to this movie, where he starts out as really brash and arrogant, and then he learns humility over the course of this film. And then, seeing this movie, it's like starting all over again and going through the same arc again. But it does it really well, and the characters of teenage Thor and Loki are fun, and they have more of a brotherly bond where Loki is playing, Thor's younger brother, where they are working together, but you still get to see a bit of Loki mischief in this.
And tell us again the name of that movie?
Thor Tales of Asgard.
Thor Tales of Asgard. Well, cool. Definitely sounds worth checking out. Definitely check out Bubbawheat's review of that on Fights, Tights, and Movie Nights. And to all of our fans, thank you all so much for doing this. Andy, thank you so much for helping to put all this together. And to everybody out there, have a good day.
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is One Last Ride by Martin Puringer. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, consider doing that for this show.